As promised, Seahawks fans, we're going to get into a mailbag answering your questions on the Seattle Seahawks. And if you want to be a part of future ones, well, then you guys need to subscribe. All of our questions come in from Seahawks Today subscribers. So if you haven't already, hit that big red button and join us today. I'm Tom Downey from Chat Sports, so let's get into this Seahawks mailbag, diving into all of your questions, beginning and first up with Nikki, who says, should the Seahawks sign Eli Apple for corner help? Maybe. I think maybe is a good answer, actually. Look, the Seahawks have been decimated by injuries, not just at corner, but really throughout the season in the secondary. But the cornerback spot in particular has been just rough this year. Griffin is banged up right now. Quentin Dunbar is on IR. In reality, the top three corners that the Seahawks had planned for this year, Griffin, Dunbar, and Blair, have been out a lot this season. That's left Trey Flowers as an option. DJ Reed's been kind of a nice surprise there. Ugo Amadi you can survive with at corner. I believe that Seattle expects that Griffin and or Dunbar will return this season, which at that point, by the time they get Eli Apple into the organization, put him on the practice squad, get him up to speed to actually playing football games. At that point, Seattle kind of has everybody back at the in terms of at the corner spot, and they don't really need him at that point. It's worth exploring if you want, but I don't think he really fixes much in the long run. From Mickey Mouse, okay. What are the playoffs shaping out to be for the Seahawks if the season ended today? Well, of course, we're going to ignore the Thanksgiving game just to keep things easier and even in terms of the timing. This is where things sit entering Week 12. Seattle right now is the 5 seed. They are 7-3, but they lose the tiebreaker against the LA Rams. And much like, last year, Seattle is once again in a position where late in the season, they will be competing for maybe the number 1 seed, maybe the number 2 seed, or even falling all the way down to the number 5 seed, having to go on the road in the postseason as a wild card team. The good news for Seattle, schedule sets up really nicely. Philadelphia, Monday Night Football, that should be a win. Giants, that should be a win. Jets, that should be a win. Washington, I still think that should be a win. This Week 16 game, though, against the Rams, that's going to be pivotal. Win that game, you probably win the division, and then Week 17 against the Niners that may or may not have a significant impact. So with the schedule in mind, knowing the Seahawks only have 3 losses right now, predict the record for me in 2020. I still think 13-3 is possible. Maybe 12-4 is a little bit more likely, but I'm going to make this the pinned comment on today's video. So if you get that ad break here on YouTube, scroll on down and get your votes in. Let's head down to Mark Clausen, and I'll focus on Dan Quinn news and Josh Gordon news. Free agents, that's a future video, so, make sure you're subscribed. We'll start with Dan Quinn here. There's been a lot of interest around Dan Quinn and speculation for Quinn when it comes to Seattle. I think it's an off-season move if it happens. If the defense ends up limiting the Seahawks postseason run, I think it makes a lot of sense to fire Ken Norton and bring back Dan Quinn. The familiarity is there. I think that would help Pete Carroll and company make a pitch for Quinn to rejoin Seattle. As for Josh Gordon, guys, it's ridiculous. I mean, Randy Gregory's back, David Irving is back, Michael Kendricks is still, allowed to play football, and Josh Gordon has had no decision made yet. And the Seahawks agreed to a deal with him, but even though Gordon applied for reinstatement back in June, been no real update. I am very surprised by that. Like many of you, I thought when Seattle made the move to add Josh Gordon, that was a sign that, hey, he's going to get reinstated really soon. That's why we added him. Instead, it's been crickets since then. And I know there's other stuff going on, but it's not fair to leave a player out in limbo in that fashion. I think what the NFL is doing, unless there's something we don't know about, is pretty darn ridiculous. From DJ Owen, I thought by now the Seahawks would have had Penny and Gordon, we just mentioned Gordon, of course, back on the field playing. Any updates on either one of these players getting back on the field this season? Well, we just mentioned Gordon. As for Rashaad Penny, maybe next week he's able to return to practice. I think it's still going to be a end-of-season reunion or addition, I should say, for Rashaad Penny. Chris Carson, in theory, should be back this week as well, so they'll be fine in the backfield. Penny's injury was going to take some time. This was kind of the early opening of his potential window. I do think, though, he's back on the field before the end of the season. Now, today's show is made possible by our sportsbook partner, BetUS. Head over to chatsports.com/bet and use the promo code you see on screen. It is Seahawks125. And once again, folks, we are bringing back our bet cover deal. Seattle, a 6-point favorite as we film this right now. It might change as we get closer to actual kickoff because you know what? That line's low. The Eagles, they're a mess right now. Carson Wentz is one of the worst quarterbacks in the NFL. So here's the deal we're doing if you are a new BetUS customer. If you bet on the Seahawks to cover against the Eagles, and they don't, we'll cover your bet loss up to $50. So think about it this way. You head over to chatsports.com/bet. You use the promo code Seahawks125. You put down $100, the minimum deposit, to get that bonus and to be eligible for this deal. You put, let's just say, 25 on this game. If the Seahawks win, congrats, you made money. If the Seahawks don't cover, you know what? That's okay. We took care of you. So if you haven't gotten started before, this is a great way to kind of get your feet wet and get acclimated to sportsbook betting. Head over to chatsports.com/bet. Use that promo code Seahawks125. And don't forget to email us at Seahawks@chatsports.com if you have questions or if, of course, the Seahawks don't cover. That's how you get that bet cover deal. All right, from Nathaniel Parks, Dunlap over under 10 sacks this year, and we'll be paying the $14.4 million next year. I think it's actually closer to $14.25, but semantics. I don't know if Dunlap's going to quite be able to get 10 sacks for the Seahawks this year. There's 6 games left. If you include the sack he had for the Bengals, it makes it a little bit more plausible. But I do think there's a real chance Dunlap finishes with 8. And if you get 8 sacks for what you gave up, a late draft pick and B.J. Finney, I mean, that was an unreal trade by Seattle. Now, let's say to the second part here, and you guys can get your votes in on this one. 14.25 is a lot for Carlos Dunlap. That is a significant amount of money for an aging player. To be honest, because there's no dead money involved, they can cut him for free. I think you don't bring back Dunlap at that price. So I'm going to type in my N for no. But what you might do is maybe you bring back Dunlap at a little bit less. Maybe it's a 2-year $30 million, or not 30, 2-year $25 million deal. That might be doable for Seattle and Dunlap. But as for this particular question, get your votes in. Y for yes, N for no. From Weenus Gaming, okay. Is the Seahawks defense capable of being a top 10 unit? Not this year. Not with all of these injuries now. If Griffin gets healthy and Dunbar plays at the level we saw he was playing at before his injury, I think you can become a league average defense. But I just don't think there's enough currently, especially still up front, especially with the way Jaron Reed's been playing. You need a lot more out of him for this to be a legitimate top 10 defense. But I think they can become close to league average, and with the way the offense has fared, that might be all you need. Now, many of you asked about Ken Norton firing, so I'm going to let you guys get your votes in here. What do you want to do with the Seahawks' current defensive coordinator? Type F for fire him, or type in K for keep. Get your votes in right now in the comments section. From Yeet Gaming 21, how could Russ get back to the MVP frontrunner? I mean, step one, obviously, is play really good football. And I'm thinking maybe not quite as great as he was in the first month or so of the season, but a little bit closer to that. Cut down on some of the mistakes, keep throwing for yards and touchdowns and all of that. But we also know the MVP often goes to a good team. If Seattle can get the number 1 seed or the number 2 seed, that might be enough if Wilson puts up big-time numbers. He's still in the mix. I do believe there's some, Mahomes will win an MVP later on type of fatigue involved from the voters, but it does require Wilson to, at minimum, win the NFC West for Seattle, which isn't fair, but that's how the MVP works. From Gaming Be Fly, in one word, grade Jamarco Jones this season. I mean, you can do one letter if you want, A, B, C, D, or F. Feel free to vote that in the comments section. But I'll stick with the original question from Gaming B Fly. I'm going to go with serviceable. I don't think Jamarcus Jones is an elite-level talent. I don't think he's an ideal starter even. But he's been able to play all over the offensive line. Having that ability does matter when you're looking for a 6th or 7th, or if you're lucky, 8th offensive lineman, Jones isn't ideal. He's not someone I want to pay a bunch of big money to, but he has been serviceable for this Seahawks team. And when you're banged up, that's exactly what you're looking for out of another one word here, versatile backup.